Hey guys, welcome to part three of the Unit 7.2 War Rages On. We're talking about the Civil War. The last video clip was wrapping up Sherman's total war, so I'm just going to talk about that a couple more seconds here. So William Sherman, which again, remember, is a Union general, a Northern general, he goes down south and he decimates everything in his path, guys. Nothing is safe. Okay, they're killing livestock animals. They're ripping up railroad tracks. They're burning down barns and, anything, crops, anything in their way. So it's not just doing battle with Confederate soldiers they find as they go. They are destroying everything in their path. That is called total war. And that's what Sherman practices as he's doing his march to the sea. Okay, the Northerners can sense victory. They've had a lot of major victories, kind of one right after another, and now you've got Sherman decimating huge chunks of the South as he's making his way to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, this pro, like, we're gonna win spirit is what ultimately will get Abraham Lincoln reelected for his second term. He wins with 55% of the vote in the North, in the United States, where people are voting, because people in the Confederacy don't vote, guys, right? Their president is Jefferson Davis. But all of the people that are in the North, still part of the Union, voted, and Lincoln wins by a good margin because people can sense, like, this is working, right? He's doing his job. We're winning the war. An end is maybe in sight. All right, so go ahead and draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page and give yourself a left-hand side question. If you need more time, push pause, because here we go. Of course, I've got a bio for you on General Sherman, and I've got some stuff on total war. Crazy, crazy things, man. So take a look at those video clips if you want to know more. All right, FYI, I told you Lincoln won already. You guys know he gets elected for a second term. Who did he go up against? Remember that general he fired, George McClellan? Yeah, George McClellan's like, oh yeah, Lincoln, take this! And he runs against Abraham Lincoln in the 1864 election to become president of the United States. If you look at the map on the slide, you can see, again, the blue states aren't going to vote. They're the Confederacy. So only the green and yellow states voted. And you can see Lincoln carries almost every single state. And again, he gets 55% of the popular vote. And George McClellan is decimated, and Lincoln gets his second term in office. Okay, while this stuff is happening, General Sherman, remember, who's with the Union, the North, he's making his way across the Deep South with that total war, march to the sea. General Grant, also for the Union, had been fighting battles against General Lee, the Confederate General Lee, for months throughout the South. They're chasing each other back and forth, trying to get a major victory. And ultimately what was happening is Grant was winning more and more of those battles, and he's slowly drawing a noose around the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. Remember, when they got Virginia to join the Confederacy, it was populous, it was wealthy. Richmond, Virginia is a very well-known city, and so the Confederate States of America had made that their capital. That's where, Jefferson Davis and things is going to live. And so Grant, from the Union, is getting closer and closer and closer into closing in on that Confederate capital. And you guys know darn well, if you sack the capital, that's probably going to kind of put the end to the war, right? And so Grant is on a roll for the Union. He's winning multiple battles throughout 1864, getting closer and closer to closing in on that capital. Ultimately, Lee falls back to Richmond, knowing he's got to defend it. And over time, what's going to happen is he can't stay in Richmond anymore. The Union Army is too strong, and the Confederate Army will have to pull out, and Lee and his men are going to leave the Confederate capital unguarded. Okay, so hint, hint, guess what's going to happen, right? Not too hard to figure out. Okay, so push pause on that for a second. When Lincoln gets his second term in office, he had tried once in 1864 to officially, legally end slavery, right? It doesn't pass through Congress. Well, he gets reelected, right? And he is going to try again in 1865. Once he knows he's going to be on his second term as president and things like that, right? So he tries again, 1865, and this time what will become the 13th Amendment of the United States. Remember, we have amendments because we can change the U.S. Constitution as the times change and there's needs that arise. You guys studied really heavily the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Remember, those were called the Bill of Rights, like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of the press and freedom to own a gun and all those kind of things. Remember that, the first 10 with the Bill of Rights. Well, now fast forward to Lincoln's presidency. We're on Amendment 13. Amendment 13 is the amendment that officially ends slavery. So he's piggybacking off what he started with the Emancipation Proclamation, and he's making it official to all slaves, whether you're a Union state, a border state, or a Confederate state. You know, legally you are part of the United States of America, even though the South's rebelling, and he ends slavery, okay? In March of 1865, he will officially start his second term as the president. And in his inaugural address, remember that means the first speech they give when they first start their term as president, he delivers a unifying message. We haven't won yet, okay? The war is not officially over, but like everybody, both sides can kind of see it's ending. The Union has been picking up wins more and more the second 2 years of the war, and the capital of the South is now left undefended, and it just is a matter of time, right? Everybody kind of sees the end in sight. And so Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, starting off his second term, talks about malice towards none. Hey, Confederacy, come back to us with open arms. Let's have charity for all. We're all human here. We had a difference of opinion, but it's, you know, coming to an end. We need to work together, North and South, to bind up the country's wounds and move on from this. Another very famous speech that Lincoln gives is his second inaugural address. He's just full of those famous speeches, okay? All right, so make sure you guys got that down. Okay, give yourself a good left-hand side question. Make sure your left-hand side question addresses the 13th Amendment and his second inaugural address. It's kind of like two situations on that same slide there. Okay, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And of course, we got some video clips for you. Moving on, the war is gonna end. Okay, so surrender at Appomattox. So the Union Army has marched into Richmond, which has been left undefended, the Confederate capital, right, by the Confederate Army. And so, of course, the Union very easily sacks the capital of the Confederacy. So General Lee, who's in the South, wants to keep fighting, okay? He's a warrior. He wants to keep at it. But, you know, after some thought, he recognizes it's a lost cause. They have gotten the hold of the capital at this point. The Union has. They've been losing battles left and right. The Confederate side has been losing battles for 2 years. A lot of people have died. People are tired of the war. The South is decimated between all the warfare that had gone on and the inflation, and people are broke and starving because of inflation rising in the South, and plus Sherman's total war going across, right? And so he just knew it was time. So on April 9th, 1865, Confederate General Lee for the South surrenders to Union General Grant for the North, right, in a town called Appomattox Courthouse. Everyone always thinks like, oh, they're at a courthouse in Appomattox. Like, no, it's actually called Appomattox Courthouse. Sometimes you'll hear people just call it Appomattox for short. They're actually at a house. They're not at a courthouse. They're in somebody's home where this takes place. And the South surrenders to the North. Because Lee recognizes you've sacked the capital of the South and there's just no way. There's no moving past this. So here's the thing. Technically, this doesn't end the war. Remember, this is before we can like get the word out within seconds to everyone in all states, everywhere fighting to stop immediately. The war's over, right? We don't have that technology in the 1800s yet. Okay. And so it takes several weeks for the war to actually completely come to an end and fizzle out. But Grant represents the largest number of Northern troops, and Lee represents the largest number of Southern troops that he has with him. Okay, and so when Lee says, that's it, we surrender, the biggest section of the Confederate troops are surrendering along with Lee, and all of them, as word spreads, all the other Confederate, troops and regiments, they fall into line one after another and wave their white flags too. So technically, Lee surrendering at Appomattox Courthouse does not end the war like that second, that day, but it comes within a matter of a few weeks as he's the, top dog general for the South, and everyone will follow suit. So now the Confederate States of America no longer exist. They've lost. Jefferson Davis is stripped of his title. He's out of power. He's not the president of anything at this point. All that Confederate money that they had printed is now valueless. So if you had a big stash of it, guess what? You're now broke. Okay. And the Confederacy is no more. It's gone. Okay. They're going to get absorbed back into the United States of America. And we're going to have to do what Lincoln said, bind up the nation's wounds and find a way to forgive each other and work through this. Okay, so that's surrender at Appomattox. Make sure you highlight, left-hand side questions, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Okay, we got some surrender or Appomattox Courthouse video clips. Check those out. And then, of course, Lee and Grant being major players in the Civil War deserve, a bio clip on them and what they were all about and things. So make sure you guys check those out on Lee and Grant. Lee, remember, most famous general for the South, and Grant, the most famous one for the North. If you can kind of see pretty much all the fighting happening down south, right? The colors, you guys, if you look at the key here, okay, the North starts by kind of taking control, and they just keep, ultimately getting more and more victories in here as we go. So just kind of a progress map of how things turned out. All right. Okay, how about the ladies? What the heck are the ladies doing while the guys are off, fighting for 4 years? What's going on with them? All right, ladies in the room, here's the deal. For the most part, the men are off at war, which means the women pick up the jobs. If you ran a farm, now you're running it and doing your job and your husband's job. If your husband and you lived in the city and he was a factory worker and stuff, well, guess what? Now you're probably a factory worker. So most women just kind of took the place of the men's roles in farms and factories and things like that as the guys were out fighting. But not all women. There was a lot of women, thousands of them, in fact, that actually serve on the front lines along with the men for both sides, Union and Confederacy, working as nurses, cooks, doing laundry, sending messages, or, being a messenger. And some even would dress up as males and hide their identity as a female and serve as a soldier. That happened on several occasions, not thousands and thousands of times or anything, but it did happen. They also, relief groups back home that weren't on the front lines with the men, but were in safe zones. They'd form these agencies and clubs, and they would do things like wash, mend, and sew uniforms and send them off to the front lines. They'd raise money, they'd do cooking and take them to traveling troops. They would can things. When you can something, you're like pickling it and it'll last a long time, and they'd take canned foods to the troops. They would do baking and things that they'd take to the troops, those kind of things, gather supplies, all that stuff, raise money, that stuff. Women for both sides, men and ladies, no, North and South. Women for both sides, North and South, were spies. Harriet Tubman, for example, is a famous spy for the Union. She fought for the North, right, carrying messages. They used all kinds of things. They used laundry, and how it was hung or the colors that were out. They would hide things in their skirts, and different things. They'd flirt their way past guards to get to where they needed to get to send messages or act as spies. Ultimately, historically speaking, the biggest thing that comes out of this, guys, for women is the experiences of the Civil War and the fact that slaves have now gotten emancipation. They are free no matter where they were from, right? The 13th Amendment has passed. it really wakes up even more women's eyes to the women's movement that had already kind of been going on for equal rights, right? And now they're going to push forward even more to try to get equality, especially politically and out in the public sphere of life for jobs and pay and, you know, rights to vote and those kind of things is really going to push forward. When you're ready, I will see you for part 4. See you then.